Wednesday, February 13th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning I want to talk about how socialism and capitalism are basically a huge globalist distraction against the concept of small government and freedom and free enterprise. Before that, of course, I'm going to quickly look through the markets, see what they're doing this morning here in London. It's just before 9 a.m. London. I'm a little later today, but it's still fairly early. So let's have a look. Yesterday, of course, the markets rallied quite strongly. The stock market, the Dow was up 372 points or 1.5%. S&P was up 35 or 1.3%. And the NASDAQ was up 1.5% as well. Right now we've got spot gold at 1312.29, up $1.50. Range has been 1309 to 1314.50. Right now, technically, we got 1315 as a resistance in gold. That was the high yesterday, and that's what the high has been today. Gold and silver did fairly well early on yesterday during the London session before the U.S. came in on the open in New York, and then everything changed. Gold drifted lower, silver also drifted lower and went nowhere while the stock market was goosed up hundreds of points. So that's what happened yesterday. Right now the Dow future is up 83, 25,504 or 1/3%. S&P 500 is up 7.5 or 1/4% as well, 2751. And the NASDAQ 100 future is back above 7,000. It's up 0.5% at 7,040. Currency-wise, we saw the dollar weaken yesterday. We've got sterling back up above 129, or cable. We're at 129.04, up 0.1%. Euro is unchanged, but is back above 113. It's at 113.25. And the dollar is up 0.2% against the yen at 110.68. So we're almost approaching 111. So the dollar remains fairly strong against the yen for now. Dollar yuan unchanged at 677. Crude oil back towards that 55 level. We are below 54, but it's 53.70, up 0.5%. So not much direction still in crude oil. Range trading, I would say. The bond market. 10-year yield did go up yesterday a bit. We're now at 269. We're, I think, 267 yesterday. The 1-year T-bill yield is at 254. The 5-year is at 250. So still inverted by 4 basis points. Capitalism and socialism. Why do I think they are a distraction away from what government should really be? That it should be small and it should promote freedom, free enterprise, sound money. Well, in my opinion, yes, it is a big distraction by the globalists to keep people, different sections of society against each other, and to bring in even bigger and bigger government. And the reason I'm talking about this is that some of my viewers have contacted me and they say, well, capitalism has failed. Maybe, we should try Marxism, or maybe we haven't really had true Marxism or socialism. But my point is that I'm not for socialism nor for capitalism. I'm for freedom and small government. By the way, Billy came in the middle of the video, so I had to stop the video and start it again, and he's on the sofa now. He came down from upstairs. He woke up. But and how do I explain this? Well, there's a great video by former Congressman Larry McDonald, and I'll put up put the link to it in the description up in the cards. And it's Larry McDonald, Economic Freedom. Larry McDonald, he was a congressman from Georgia, and he ran as a Democrat, but he was really not a Democrat in today's sense of the sense of the word. Unfortunately, he passed away on September 1st, 1983. The plane he was flying on, Korean Airlines Flight 007, was shot down over Soviet airspace. He was flying to South Korea. Some people say that it was one of the interviews he did with CNN, where he exposed the New World Order, the CFR, the globalists, and the fact that Rockefeller was involved in that, and that they were controlling both capitalism and communism. And if some of you think that's outlandish to say that the bankers and the globalists controlled communism and socialism, that the Cold War was just like a theater, well, you need to read the work of Anthony Sutton. He documented all that in his work. There's loads of books by Anthony Sutton, like Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, many other publications that will show you exactly what I mean by that. But anyway, yes, listen as well to the CNN interview that he did, where he exposed the New World Order. That was, I think, in May 1983, and he died in a plane crash in September 1983. Some people would say, and loads of all the other people, of course, died on that Korean airline flight. And you might say, well, it was just an accident. But these people are so evil, in my opinion, that they will shoot down a plane and kill hundreds of people just to kill one person. So that's, that's my opinion. I don't have any proof of that, of course, but it's quite, I don't know, it's suspect. So this speech by Larry McDonald, I found it on YouTube. It must have been in the early 80s, I would say a year or two before the interview. And he was talking about economic freedom and how America's system is actually not a system. It's not an ism. And that's the problem with socialism, capitalism, Marxism, and whatever other ism you want to put in there. America is not, there's a lack of system. That's the strength of the American system. And I'm just going through what he said here, but I highly recommend the speech. It's only 10 minutes. And he talks about how America's system, or lack thereof, is really a system of, well, I keep using the word system. America is really about economic freedom, prosperity, free enterprise, non-government interference. Government is supposed to stay away from people's business, stay away from the farm, from the professions. And then he talks about how all that has changed so much in the 20th century, how the growth of government has been explosive. He talks about the great change in the 20th century, how away from limitation of society placed by the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that these documents are negative documents restricting the growth of government. But nowadays, as Larry McDonald said in 1980, and it's even gotten worse, the federal government is heavily involved in interfering with how doctors doctor, he says, how teachers teach, and he makes a joke telling carpenters how to carp. The other point he makes is that the explosive growth in the 20th century of the federal government is far beyond the bounds imposed by the U.S. Constitution. He says that there are no areas in which the U.S. federal government is not involved in the U.S. nor around the world for that matter. The other great point he makes, and then he moves on to the central bank, the Federal Reserve System, is that politicians are reluctant to raise taxes directly to finance the huge cost of running big government, or this explosive growth we've had in the 20th century, and that the result of that is deficits that result in a growing national debt. And at the time, he was saying that the debt was approaching $1 trillion. So that is, from what I know about the debt, sorry, not the deficit, from what I know about the debt, that was around in 1980, just before Reagan took over. He talks about how servicing that debt is the third largest item on the federal budget. I'm not sure where that is today, but I wouldn't say it's any better. And now he comes to the central bank. He says to further service the debt and creation of new money, we've had the development of a central banking apparatus called the Federal Reserve System. And he notes that the founding fathers had great arguments over the question of central bank, and there has been great arguments over the past decades, and even since Mr. McDonald died. He says that the Federal Reserve is an engine of inflation. And I'll quote here. He quotes Thomas Jefferson on the question of the federal debt. And this is very interesting. So this is a quote from Thomas Jefferson, and I'll read. I place economy among the first and most important virtues, and public debt as the greatest of dangers to be feared. To preserve our independence, we must make our election between our economy and liberty, or profusion and servitude. If we run into such debts, we must be taxed in our meat and drinks, in our necessities and comforts, in our labors and our amusements. If we can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of caring for them, they must become happy. So that's the old pursuit of happiness, right? Then he talks about the growth of government and how that has been synonymous with inflation. And he notes that, and I quote him, politicians do not fear inflation. They love it. As inflation is the mechanism for buying votes from special interests in order to ensure their re-election a lot of the times. The other great point he makes is that, and I've made this point, that inflation is not a rising prices. Inflation is, the creation of new money, or counterfeiting, as he calls it. And, and I quote him, he says, saying inflation is rising prices is like saying that the wet streets cause the rain. So the other great point he makes, who causes inflation? Well, there's only two groups that cause inflation. Counterfeiters, and he notes that if they get caught, they get put in prison. And also the federal government, politicians cause inflation. And he notes that politicians, though, instead of putting them in prison for counterfeiting, we return them to office, praising them as great humanitarians. So I thought that was quite interesting. What's happening today? Well, I leave it for you to judge what's happening with government. The fact that we're running in the U.S. over $1 trillion deficits, not debts, that's adding on to the debt. So that's what's going on in the U.S. Government is not getting any smaller. He says that the growth of government has strangulated the productive capacity of the U.S. And he says there's been a basic shift in the philosophy of American society. Instead of thinking of government more as a protector of liberty and property, government has become more of a provider, a leveler, he calls, a leveler. And he says that the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and the 10 Amendments did the best they could, the Founding Fathers, to make sure that government would not be a leveler. Of course, government right now has not been a leveler, has been a disleveler, of course, but it's been it's moved, it's transferred wealth from the public to the crony capitalists. I'm sure if Mr. McDonald was alive today, he would say yes. Capitalism, yes, we have capitalism. It's the cronyism, and doesn't mean that we have to go to socialism, because that's just another way to transfer wealth. And that if you really want to be free, independent, and have economic freedom and small government, you have to move away from that concept of capitalism versus socialism. You know, them versus us. They keep dividing us, and that's what they want to do: divide and rule. And that's what the globalists want to do, and that's how they keep control, by dividing and ruling us. Divide and conquer. So that's my answer to people who say, oh, capitalism has failed, we need to try Marxism or bigger government, we need to, confiscate all the wealth from the 0.1% or 1%. Well, that's not the answer. The answer, in my opinion, is to get away from all the distraction, get back to small government, get back to freedom, get back to sound money. It's up to each one of us to live within our means and to try to get away from this system. It's not going to be easy, but I'm just trying to wake people up that what we have now is a big distraction. Socialism versus capitalism. And it's the people, it's the globalists who are in charge, who are the main culprits of this distraction, in my opinion. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Also hit the notification button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.